Good evening, everybody. Thank you ever so much for joining in this evening on navigating Ex-racehorse life, managing the Canter. Thank you all so much for signing up. We've had so many people sign up, and it's so positive and so encouraging. And I'm always in awe and so inspired and humbled with the amount of people that want to sign on and want to listen and learn and are kind of, it means a lot. It really, really, really means a lot. So thank you ever so much. This evening we are going into managing the Canter. I always see the Canter as a potential pain point for quite a few of us with our former racehorses. Um, Mainly because it's the place where we might, as riders, feel the most out of control or the most vulnerable or the most like what if scenarios. And, the transitions themselves can be quite taxing. The rideability in the Canter can be a little bit of a struggle. So, yeah, thank you so much for signing on. And I'm really glad this topic is of interest. If you have any specific topics you would like us to cover, please do message Ali at the ROR because we are always open for feedback. We're always wanting to tailor these sessions to you guys. So please do that. Any feedback is welcome. Like we really do encourage it. First, just before we get started off, please, 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 either one, if you'd like to take a screenshot or a photo of something going on this evening and tag either the ROR but also Agria. So the reason we can provide these webinars free to you guys is because of Agria's generous support. It means we can reach a wider audience. We've got people kind of dialing in from all over the world. If you want to know about Agria's insurance plans, whether it's for your horse, your dog, your cat, or your rabbit, just scan the QR code and you can they'll send you a quote or you can start filling out forms. The people at Agria actually have X-race horses. So when I say they get it, they do get it and they understand. But please do either say thank you to Agria and or go and get a quote for them because they truly are lovely and we are so grateful to them for supporting these webinar series. So if you've been on a few webinars before, this is where we always kind of start with. This is my first opening question, but if you haven't been on here before, welcome. So the question I always start with is, where are we starting? So with these horses, we are starting with horses that have been bred to go fast. You've all got X-race horses here. I'm not telling you anything you don't know. But they have been bred to be horses that cover the most amount of ground with the minimal amount of effort, whether that's including jumping efforts or not. So they've been bred to gallop. So the way in which their body is put together, take away their training, kind of take away the mental aspects of it, how they have been put together from their conformation and their body composition in front of you is to be a good racehorse. And when we're transitioning these horses into riding horses, so obviously I'm coming at it from a dressage perspective with the hope to compete. But even if we're not looking to compete, because that is not the focus with these horses, it's like an added bonus or an added extra, we are changing up the way in which they use their body. And we've also got a confirmation, not in a negative way, but which is slightly not against us, but it's bred for them to go fast and flat. So if you've ever galloped a racehorse, there's this really cool moment when you're cantering along and you ask them to extend out into the gallop. In that moment, the horse almost feels like it kind of sinks down to the floor and then extends out in front of you. And the horse's body has got to be best designed to do that function. So when we're then putting them into a riding horse situation of the rider being on top of them, around them, this concept of leg to hand, pushing from the hind leg, lifting, suppleness, throughness, all the kind of key phrases you might hear, we are not only changing the way in which they use their body, but we're also changing the language to which we are speaking to them, the way in which they balance, the way in which they use their body, the way in which we use the leg, put the position of the rider. It does all change. So I think it's really key and important that we understand how these horses have been put together so that we learn to train the horse that we have in front of us, not necessarily the one that we want. So I don't really like comparing the warm blood to the thoroughbred because I think it is detrimental to both breeds. But I think it's important just to have a look of kind of playing a bit of spot the difference between the two conformational types. So the one on the left is Kento. He was world dressage champion as a 6-year-old and a 7-year-old, and he's now towards the higher levels of dressage. He's based with Lottie Fry out in the Netherlands. He's part of the Van Alst horses. The horse on the right is one of my very good ex-racehorses now turned dressage horses. He's called Greg Saint Gregoire. He ran over the mile. And we're going to play a bit of spot the difference with these two horses as they're stood up. So Canter, the horse on the left, as you can see, he's built in what you call an uphill fashion. So his bottom is lower than that of his wither. His neck comes like kind of up and out, like in a crest shape, like a crescent moon shape. And his hind legs, the way in which they're positioned, they kind of have a curve. So they are, you'll get that kind of flexibility and the ability to push and go forward. Now, Greg on the right, his bottom is higher than that of his wither. So you would call that croup high. His forelimb, if you were to draw a straight line, so these horses are stood in two very, quite a similar way. Greg's forelimb is positioned behind the vertical, and you see his shoulder almost looks a bit like a boulder. And his neck is set below the wither. So if you look at the wither, you can almost see the line in his coat, which means that his neck drops down below the line of his wither. Where these two horses stood similarly is also the amount of space available under their stomachs. So there is a lot more space available, which is really key and really important, because when we put these conformations into movement, so just standing up our horses and looking at them, we're kind of looking at them of when we start moving them, so walk, trot, canter, what are the kind of physics that are going to occur? So how is this horse going to move, and where is their balance naturally going to go? So with the racehorse, because the forelimb is positioned ever so slightly behind the vertical, and you've got the downhill motion from the hind end down into the wither, you kind of end up almost with this toppling effect. So kind of everything falling into their downhill, which is why they feel a bit on the forehand, or people might say to you they're running onto the forehand, especially in the early days. And as a result of this, to literally stop themselves somersaulting, that's where they stick their neck in the air. So their neck is like a fifth leg to then help balance themselves, because their hind end pushes them up and over the top. When we have these horses, when they first come out of racing, they are then like weak through the back. So you would call that maybe poor posture. They have asymmetries because they've been ridden predominantly in one direction, or they have a favored side. It's like being left-handed or right-handed as a human. So you would again, and the hind limb is kind of straighter behind compared to the warm blood. So when we then put this into motion, and you're riding them, especially sometimes in the canter, it almost feels like you're about to fall off over a mountain edge, or like everything kind of crumbles away in front of you onto the shoulders. Or you might have that feeling where they feel like they're pulling into the rein quite a lot, or they're quite strong, or they feel like they're bearing down. And then as a result of it, they get a little bit hot to the leg, or they shut down and they kind of slow down, they feel like they can't move forward. Again, this is all because of the physics and the dynamics that these horses are dealing with from a conformational point. And then like where you see on the blue arrow with Greg, that is where everything kind of falls down and they brace through the base of their neck. So when I'm talking about the base of the neck, it's from their wither down to their chest. So it's not just the bottom bit where their neck comes out of their chest. It's like that whole area. So if you imagine where their rug line is, or if you wear a martingale or a neck strap, where that neck strap sits, that is where these guys kind of hold and brace, because they struggle to use their back. They struggle to get the hind leg underneath because it's not built to come underneath and sit and push. It can come underneath them, but not in a kind of carrying capacity. So that's where you kind of get this loading of the front end. So in this image here, you can see in the walk phase, this horse is warming up for his first Prix Saint-Georges, is that again, in the walk, you can see how far the forelimb comes back under the body. The hind limb goes straight and up because it's got no space to then follow through and kind of come underneath the horse. The straightness behind, the pushing up, the falling down into the wither. And then again, that slight lift up through the underside of the neck. So that's why these guys get quite strong through the base of their neck, because it's a balance thing. So then when we're sat on top of them, and we are maybe looking for slightly like a rounder frame or a softer frame, it's really easy for our eyesight to take over, because our eyesight feeds back to our brain, obviously, but it's trying to tell us, are they round or are they on the bit? And we can get too almost hyper fixated on them being on the bit, where actually if we were asked them to be round in the neck, again, they'd feel like they're toppling forward. So again, as a result of these conformational things, is that, we might have problems with saddle fit. We might feel like the horse is plowing all the time. And again, when you're turning from left to right, that might be a little bit different. Like you might feel that your horse is quite good on the left rein and the right rein is an absolute disaster, or vice versa. So we're naturally going to try and avoid going on the right rein because it's fun for no one. Going through corners feels a bit like a motorbike, or like IKEA flat pack. And then as a result of this, horses either speed up too fast, or they slow down, or they stick their head and neck in the air. They go too fast forward. They don't go forward enough. All of these kind of signs are kind of a kind of a sign to a horse struggling in balance, struggling to use their body, and they're trying to use their body best for how their balance is at that moment in time in training. Um, because these horses have run predominantly in one direction. So if you're in the UK, they run predominantly left. If you're in the Southern Hemisphere, they have ran predominantly on the right. Horses, again, we get on from the left, we lead them from the left. Everything's on the left. So it's quite difficult for these horses, but they will have asymmetries. Like I said, it's like being left-handed or right-handed. But that might show itself in, so let's say your horse is from the UK and it's ran predominantly left-handed. Their left foot might be flatter, their left shoulder might be bigger, their right foot might be more upright, their right hind, as a result, might do something where it looks a bit weak, or it plats, or it might kind of show a low level lameness in the early days, again, because it's a weakness, because it's not as strong as the left. We talk about their second thigh muscle. So on their hind legs, the bit from their stifle as it goes down towards their hocks, it can be like really big and predominant on the left and then flat on the right hand side. All of these kind of physical attributes will then lead to what you might experience as a rider or see in your training. Just like things to consider with these horses as we're training them. So these are Amy Murphy's horses when she was based in the UK. She'd take them to the beach. But again, it's really key to understand how these horses have started off in their first career. So how have they been ridden? And what does, again, cantering particularly look like to them? So you can see these horses are in a different phase of the stride, apart from the one on the left and the bottom right. Again, you can get slight head tilting. This can be a physical problem, but again, it can also be like a learned behavior if this is how this horse balances in this moment in time. The riders work predominantly above these horses. So if you've got, trainers saying to you, sit into them, get your leg around them in the early stages, especially, talking about seat aids or weight aids, these guys don't really understand that in the early stages because this is how they kind of start off their life. But again, you can see in the canter phase, you get that slightly bottom up, the stiffer lower back. And again, this kind of working forward into the rein. So these guys do know what a contact is, but the contact in their term of racehorse is different to that as a riding horse. Before we ever consider anything, or whether we're having a training concern or problem, or we just feel like we've hit a bit of a stumbling block, we always have to remember that the comfort and the welfare of the horse is always the first thing that we have to consider. So things like their surroundings, access to turnout. So World Horse Welfare, look at the 3Fs. Do they have access to freedom? So that's turnout. Do they have access to forage, like ad lib forage at all stages? So whether they're out in the field, do they have enough grass? Do they need supplementing with hay? Do they have enough when they come into the stable? And do they have friends? So do they have, they're a herd animal. Do they have access to horse on horse interaction, whether that's in fields or over fencing or stuff, but they've got to have that horse to horse interaction. Are they happy and settled in their daily life? So their routine, does suit them best? Do they prefer being out all the time? Do they prefer being in at night? Their bedding, all of this leads to the mental and emotional and physical well-being of the horses, but it also their guts as well. Like ex-racehorses, we all know, ulcers are a concern. But if we've got good forage, we've got a good diet, we've got good gut health, we're kind of on the way a little bit. And it's making sure the horse is healthy at all stages. So we always have to make sure that before we ask any questions or any further questions or any questions that are too great for the horse, or we have a question mark, are they comfortable? And then we always have to remember that balance is found, it's not forced. So we can't force these horses into a frame. We can't be striving for the Instagram perfection. We have to always be open to the longer journey with these horses. And it's really hard, especially in the world we live in now with social media. Social media is fantastic, but it can also be our downfall. So we always have to remember this is the same horse from racing all the way through to his dressage horse career. And we just have to remember that what might look as slightly like an ugly duckling starting phase, or we feel like we're not getting anywhere, there is always a way through. But the main thing is that we always strive to put the horse in the best balance that we can for their level of training at that stage. We never force it, we never push it. The horse has to want to work for us. They have to feel able to work for us. They have to feel able to move and adapt themselves. So yeah, balance is always found. It's not forced in these horses. Um, so like I was saying, like all horses are wider at the hips than they are at the shoulders, but combined with the croup high tendency of the ex-racehorse, we have this kind of toppling and condensing effect. So again, without meaning to sometimes by trying to make them round and bend and do all the things that we hear and all these kind of catchphrases, we end up slightly crunching them up a little bit. And yes, we want them to work and use themselves and do themselves. But what we have to do, again, is be mindful of the way these horses are put together. So with the thoroughbred, we always have to think of shoulders first. And we always have to think about balancing them according to how they're built, which is for them getting their shoulders up and out and in front of them, getting their shoulders level. Because if we try and make them too round too early on, they're going to have this slight tumble effect forward. And again, when they stick their head and neck in the air, that is that they're struggling in their balance. So we've always got to think to start off with the shoulders forward level out and in front. Once the shoulders are level, we've then got to think about turning the shoulders. And then the concept of bending comes from the horse being able to have their front feet out in front of them and being able to flex their rib cage while still staying balanced in front. It's not about pulling their neck in. It's not about pulling their neck short. It's about them being able to kind of stretch forward into the bend. So if you've got a horse that maybe isn't in front of you enough, it would be easy to kick these horses forward and into, which again will cause that kind of somersault effect. So with the shoulders, we've always got to think shoulders up and in front, and then kind of think of expanding the shoulders out a little bit to the side. Once we've got the shoulders level, they can release their neck. But if they're not equal across their front feet, they won't be able to release their neck. And when I say equal across their front feet, that might feel like they're leaning on one side. So if they're on the right rein, they feel a bit stiff, or they feel like they, in inverted commas, won't get off your right leg. Or on the left, they might feel a bit like a drift car, like they're kind of falling in, falling out, and everything's kind of going all over the place. The reality is they're not kind of carrying equal weight across their front feet. And so therefore, any question that you ask, they won't fully understand it. They will really, really struggle with it a little bit more. Once you have the stability in front, so this is like a few years down the line, is that we then think about transferring the weight so that they carry equal weight across all four hooves and working towards self-carriage. And again, with these guys, what we have to do is think about transferring the weight to their hips, not to their hocks, because again, the hocks can almost make them sit too far, or we end up like almost without meaning to pull them back. And again, like if you think back to that confirmation photo of Greg, they're not built to sit on their hocks and carry the weight behind. It's not that they can't. It's just that we have to be mindful of that time and that process and the questions that we're asking, and how much we ask at what stage, because again, we're working past that confirmational point at that time. We do have to be mindful of the head and the neck position, especially in the early stages. So in the early stages, there's lots of, long and low, getting them to stretch, but there comes a point where long and low becomes no, I don't want to say detrimental because it's too strong, but a kind of the less than ideal, because we've got these horses that are croup high. If we get them to get to the point where their pole goes below their wither, they end up over exacerbating that bottom up, loading onto the front end. Your farrier won't like you because they're putting excess strain on those front feet. They're not actually stepping through, they're just pushing their bottom further in the air. And the best way I can equate that to is get a wheelbarrow, go and push it a little bit faster than you think you should, and it'll tip up over the front. And that's exactly what it feels like to these horses if we put them too long and low too early on. As they become more established in their balance, like a more advanced horse, more advanced thoroughbred, might be able to stretch the neck out and forward whilst being out, because they're stronger through their back, so they're able to carry themselves through their middle. But when they can't carry themselves through their middle, it's really difficult for them to be able to do. So when someone's just said, what do you mean by keeping the shoulders level? The best way to think about it is think about if they've got a table across their shoulders, or they've got a set of weighing scales like I've got in these images here, and put a glass of wine or your drink a favor on that table, and think that when the horse turns, is that table level? Does that drink stay up? Because as soon as they're dropping their shoulders and they're not balancing their shoulders, they're overloading one side. And like I said, you might feel that as weight in the rein or leaning on the leg. Um, so yeah, it's just kind of like just keeping everything a little bit more balanced and in front. So you can see here on the left-hand images of it was a young horse in training in like her dressage career post racing. The rider had been kind of told to sit up and back into her to, so you're sitting on your seat bones. But you can see in the canter phase when the horse gets too low in front, she almost double overs in her neck. She comes behind the vertical, the excess loading of the front end, the bottom going in the air, the rider almost having to push herself too far back. And this leads to actual kind of compression of the middle. So we're not getting that lift up. It's really quite difficult because again, you're having to kind of go against what your eyesight thinks because your eyesight's looking for this rounded horse. But if we go to the images on the right, if you ride them a little bit half seat, because in the early stages they're not strong enough through their back and their posture, you get them more to be able to drop the neck forward and out. Their back comes up to you. And again, on the top right image, the shoulders are down, so you've not got the balance. Whereas the bottom right image, the shoulders are up and level in front. There's more of like a level balance from front to back and across their shoulders. So therefore you get the core engaged and lift, and you can get the nose to draw out and forward. The ultimate aim is to then work towards this kind of frame where you've got a good balance from front to back. You've got a good balance. You can see the chest of the horse is coming more up and to, the nose is drawing more forward, the neck is out in front, and the rider is able to sit taller, but still not back and down and in. Um, so yeah, that's kind of what we're kind of hoping to do. So approaching the canter transition, I personally always feel like if something's going to go wrong, in inverted commas, the trot canter is the most daunting. And making it sound basic and very simple, but we've just got to think of it as a step rather than a kind of like a transition, because a transition can almost seem slightly explosive in itself. So this horse here has won almost £1 million. He's only just started cantering under saddle. And as you can see, he has green moments. He sticks his head in the air. He loses his balance. But again, it's all very normal. But you can see from the rider here, Sophie, she does a really grand job. She's just got her hands quietly on the neck. She takes herself half seat into trot, and the horse, like, we just want them to step into canter. So it's not an explosive jump. It's not a kind of like off we go. There's no sitting. There's no leg aid. It's just off a voice cue. So the horse steps forward. It sounds a bit maybe over controlling, but if we can control that first step of it just being a step, their brain stays softer, they stay more relaxed, and we're setting the tone a little bit for the body and the brain so that instead of when they go off a bit quick and they stick their head and neck in the air, it will then take you at least half a circle or a while to settle them because they go off a bit sharp. And again, if we sit on them in that early stage, in that transition, in that trot to canter, um, they'll shoot off, and then it becomes legs and hands and trying to put your outside leg back and your inside leg on the girth and kick go. It's a lot for these horses, and they don't understand what it's all about. So again, it's like being able to think about how do they do trot to canter in their first career, which is riders literally stand up out their seats and just go on, mate, off you go, and they pick up the canter. They're very workmanlike when they're up on the gallops. And they settle into the bridle and both hands sit on top of the neck. I think here you can see there is perfect. You can see Soph's hands just sit quietly on top of the neck. She's in her own self-carriage. She's not leaning on the neck, but her hands are just there and quiet. And then as he comes forward into the canter again, the hand is just still. This is how it is in work riding. And again, I think if we can adopt this approach or this understanding, it then helps us in those first few steps into the canter transition. We also have to remember to reorganize and rebalance these horses. We don't pull back against them, which is so hard because we as riders, when we feel panicked, is that we pull the rein because we go into fight or flight mode. But with these guys, what we've got to do is always think reorganize and rebalance them. So whether that's a slight turn, a slight going sideways, something to make them think about their feet, and also something so that they stay balanced and we can touch and ease a rein rather than kind of like pull back against them, because we pull back against them, they meet the rein, they feel like they can't move forward, and then things can kind of start to kind of go a bit from that point. It's a very technical term, that so I'm a really, really big advocate of half seat. It does make your thighs burn as a rider. Not gonna lie, not gonna say you got to hold it forever, But for some horses it works and for some horses it doesn't. So for the horses that it works really well for, it gets them softer over the back. It gets them so that you can touch the rein, because especially when they go high in the neck and you touch the rein, they can feel like they can't move forward and it's a block. So it's a really good way to start being able to have the conversation with the rein by removing yourself out of the saddle. It's really good. I love it. I absolutely love it. And it's really great. But on horses that double over in the neck, as in they get too low and tucked into their chest, for horses that are really, really wobbly, horses that are maybe not traveling forward enough, as in going forward, and for horses where you just feel like they're not taking you, as in their front legs aren't out in front of you, half seat isn't ideal and doesn't work. So therefore, I would, for those horses, say sit up a little bit taller, and you've got to think about being able to rearrange them so you get their front feet out in front of them, the shoulders stay more out in front of them, and the exercises we'll go through now will hopefully help with that. So yeah, half seat's not for everybody, but I do think it's a really good tool to be able to use. Really, really, really good. So if you've got a horse so someone's just said they've got a horse that's struggling with the contact, and that she knows that it will come in time. This would be like riding in half seat through some of these exercises would be really good, because it means you can touch a rein and think about them softening their jaw and, but still being able to travel forward. It's a really good way, again, if you think of where Sophie had her hands on top of the neck. Sometimes with these guys, all you've got to do is think about sliding the bit across their tongue, because it's almost too strong for them and they come up and off it. But yeah, it's like you've just got to think slide the bit, rather than kind of pull the bit. So again, because in work riding, the hand is always very, very still. This image is not my own. I wish it was. It's very, very, very good. But again, for the people that are asking about, the shoulders staying level, front feet out in front of them, carrying equal weight across both front feet, if you imagine you've got a rail of poles either side of you as you're doing a circle or a turn, imagine you are in between those rails. So then it stops, because if the horse drops their shoulders, they're going to fall to the inside. So you've got to keep the shoulders level so they turn. It's a bit like when you ride a bike. When you ride a bike, you turn the bike, you don't drop the bike to the inside, because otherwise you kind of you kind of fall over and it's an absolute nightmare. So even once we get cantering, if you go off from trot to canter in half seat, you don't have to go forever, because again, it's small little good bits. So what it is always about with these guys is improving the confidence of both the horse and the rider, and also the rideability. So it's tempting, especially on the weaker side, to keep going forever and ever and ever and ever, because you finally got the transition. But actually doing small little good bits is really important to improve the confidence of the brain of the horse and the ability of the horse. And again, if you also think that when they release their neck, they're lifting their back up, it's the equivalent of doing a sit-ups. And quite frankly, after 5 sit-ups, they start to burn like heck. So, you just have to be mindful of that. So again, this is one of my diagrams. Sorry, I haven't written it out formally. But if you on a circle, like a big 20-meter circle or 30 meters, like half the arena, nothing smaller than a 20-meter circle in the early days, is you don't have to do it this frequently, but if you think, let's say the squiggly stars are a canter transition, you canter off your voice cue, so just like 3 or 4 clicks. Try to avoid the phrase "and canter," because that can sound a bit explosive. I know I'm being maybe quite pedantic, but again, it's how you're using your voice as to how these horses respond. Or even just a whistle or something, so they step into the canter. Canter for the count of 5 or 5 strides, and then trot. And then trot along, stay in half seat, canter again. So again, you're just doing it on repeat for the count of 5 or the count of 10. So what you're doing is working on the rideability. And again, it might feel like you're not cantering for very long, but at least your brain and as a rider, you're feeling that go forward, come back. My brakes work. And the horse begins to tune into you a little bit more, because they're not going forever. They're not scooting off. Small little good bits are always the way through with these horses, rather than kind of going forever and ever and ever and ever. So the trot to canter transitions, like these are an absolute sticker of a point with these horses, especially on the more difficult side. So again, if we can think of always reorganizing and rebalancing these horses, so depending on the level of where your horse is at, this exercise is great. So this exercise is great for beginning stages all the way through to even learning like walk to canters, counter canter. It's really, really good. So in these videos here, I'm doing a little bit of sitting trot, badly, I might add, but sitting trot into the canter transition. because sometimes when we go into the sitting trot alone, that can cause them to kind of put their neck up, drop their back. And that's like the second or third stage from your half seat. So yeah, I would kind of, if you're in this stage, do your sitting trot, is the horse relaxed, and then pick up your canter. And it also means if you have moments like that when the horse gets a little bit fresh, you're turning and you're curving, you're reorganizing them, you're rebalancing them, rather than pulling back against them. And again, you don't canter forever, canter half a circle and come back to the trot. This horse is a young horse, loved a little bit of a buckaroo. And he's a big, strong horse. Like he's probably one of the strongest horses I've ridden to this day. Um, and again, on the harder side, it just allows us to reorganize and rebalance them. But again, I would, in the early stages, if you're struggling with your canter transition, actually avoid doing the sitting trot. And I would do my canter transition if once I've done the half seat stuff, I would do it from rising trot. And again, just using my voice so that the horse learns to go forward. And then as time goes on, I start to bring in a leg aid. So just my outside leg back. Most of these guys aren't great with both legs at the same time because they can naturally shoot forward a little bit onto the shoulders. But this exercise is really, really good, especially for your weaker side, to kind of slightly set them up a little bit and move them around. So that would be one of my exercises I would try if you're struggling with the canter lead, and also the canter transition itself. Like I said, it helps pick up the correct lead, so the inside lead, but you can break it down also then to being able to do sitting trot into the canter, which then again thinks about the progression of the stages. And it just helps organize everybody without force. My second exercise, if you're struggling with your canter strike offs, would be a crock of poles, 12, 6, 3, and 9. And I would do it in the trot where I'd start off like trotting over the middle color of the poles, leg yield out. So you go around the outside of the poles, leg yield back in. And what you're doing with that leg yield is just quietly moving their middle and moving their shoulders around a little bit. So again, they're not overloading a side. Then pick a pole, how you feel, and you step over a pole. And as you feel them step over the pole, you ask for the canter. Again, I would start a little bit in half seat. And as soon as they've picked up the canter, you just slightly canter away. So again, you go back around the outside of the circle of the poles even. And then for the downward transition, you do the same. You'd curve slightly back into a pole and trot as you approach the pole and go over it, which will stop horses who are strong and pulling down and leaning. That will stop them running away with you. It will help that first stride pick up, because you're bending the joints and the limbs a little bit. So yeah, if you can get them to step over a pole, that would be really, really good. So when you've got so someone's just said, what about the stuffy canter piaffe, the ones that don't want to move forward in that first stride? Stepping over a pole would be great because again, it's a forward motion rather than some horses almost you feel them kind of pedaling backwards a little bit because they're almost trying to work out how to use their legs and how to get them stepping and going. But yeah, that would be it's a really good way for horses to be able to go forward. Another thing, if your horse is struggling with the correct canter pickup, would be on a circle, so the top right image is slightly so counterintuitive. Counterflex them. So if let's say you struggle with right rein canter pickup, slightly flex them just through their ears to the left, leg yield a bit off your left leg, and then on your circle, slightly turn right and pick up the canter. What that does is it just slightly, because on their weaker side, so like I said, if it's the right rein pickup you're struggling with, their right hind kind of comes to the inside anyway. But what they can do is they can collapse a bit, and because they take us as a rider to the right, their left side is free, which is why they pick up the outside lead. So sometimes if you leg yield them off your outside leg, it actually puts their right hind leg to the inside, and it encourages it to strike off and step forward in that first stride, and it gets their hind legs out the way of their shoulders. The other opposite to that is to leg yield back to the track. And then again, by leg yielding back to the track, it kind of gets that weaker hind leg to kind of strike up and pick up even. And I would do that both ways. Now, with the leg yields as well, what I would also say is using your neck strap to get them to move over, especially on their stiffer side. Because let's say, again, you're on your right rein, you're struggling with the right canter pickup, you use a neck strap. So let's say you're kind of doing the bottom image, you want to go over to the side, you would use your neck strap to open the shoulders up to the left. So you take the shoulders away with your neck strap, and then you put in your right leg. So what you're doing is your neck strap is guiding them as to when you put your right leg on as to where you want them to go. Again, it's about taking those shoulders on a slightly different line to the back legs, getting the shoulders out in front of them. Because if you think back to those comparison photos, the forelimb's always going to come back under their body a little bit. So as soon as we can get the shoulders out and in front and away, then they can pick up the canter a lot better, which might seem, again, mad because we're talking about hind limbs all the time. But with these guys, it's get the shoulders out the way all the time. Sorry, just checking in on the questions. When you then also go from canter to trot, sorry, I've got a spelling mistake on that. It's when it says dynamic of the handles, it's meant to be hind legs. When these guys canter, they've got good canters. They are bred to canter. So the canter hind limb kind of goes 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and you've got this bend and this jump and this step. This horse has got an exceptionally good canter. This is his weaker rein, and you probably saw in that downward transition, as he came to trot, he sticks his head and neck in the air. So again, going back to this exercise is perfect for the downward transitions as well, of that slightly smaller circle to the inside. So what it does is for horses that stick their head and neck in the air, it allows me to ease the rein and turn. So again, they're not slightly blocked in front. But when we think of the dynamics of the hind legs, you've got them kind of going 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and then they've got to go back to diagonal pairs. And when you kind of go from a big hind limb movement to diagonal pairs coming back closer together, that's when you feel that rocket forward, because they almost miss a stride, or that throw forward, and that's when they feel like they grab the rein and run. So by turning them, what it does without forcing it is it actually makes the hind limb action a little bit smaller without preventing them from moving. So as you can see through here, I think there's one that's a bit better over here. So as I'm cantering, there we go. As he's cantering, the hind limb gets smaller and closer together. So therefore, as he trots, his hind legs are naturally a little bit closer back together, ready for the trot phase, which then stops him pulling forward. If you can, in the early stages, I'd also like get them a bit more voice activated. So we're not pulling the rein, because as soon as we pull the rein, they're going to pull backwards and forwards and into again. So the disunited horse, this is quite common for horses that get stiff through the lower back, or you start cantering and they change out behind, or they change canter lead and you think, oh my God, what is going on? So this horse here, I'm just warming her up to get her going, like before I get on her. She's in the early stages, and I believe all horses, you know, if they want to have a buck and a kicking around, I'd much rather them do it by themselves that there. And so they're more settled when I get on. But as you can see here, even like free lunging, this mare gets tight in the back. She's having a great time, but you know, she gets tight in the back, she changes out behind. So even as I'm warming her up for riding, I want her to be able to do canter to trot without changing the hind limb out as she goes to trot. Now, the reason they do this is to protect their back. They're a bit, you know, poor in their posture. You can see she's stiff in her neck and she wants to look a little bit to the outside. This is all of her natural dynamics in the early stages, and it'd be easy to be like, well, you know, insert all the things, but the reality is that, you know, sometimes it's difficult because it's like, I sit on both sides. So do we get them on the lunge? So I do believe that some horses on the lunge, if they can't do it on their own on the lunge, like can pick up right canter, the more difficult canter, with a rider on board, it's going to make it worse. But I do also know that some horses, for example, really struggle on the lunge. They accelerate off. You know, yard owners don't want their arena surface being ripped up. And sometimes we do need to get on them to show them how to do it, because their brain takes over and they can't cope with the lunging and it's too much for them. So it's different for each horse and different each horse and rider combination. If your horse is more settled with you on board trying to teach them, great. It might be that once you've taught them under saddle, that they can then start to do it on the lunge, because they need that rider support to allow their brain to think about what they're doing. For some horses, they need to be able to work it out themselves on a lunge and find the confidence in the long reins there to help set them up and balance them, for them then to be able to translate it with a rider. It varies horse to horse as to what you need to do. Sorry, that video's done itself twice. So this exercise is amazing for horses that pull, horses that struggle with the canter transition, and horses that get disunited. Again, it's more about little good bits rather than kind of going forever. So you have the 3 trot poles in the middle. You go over the 3 trot poles. You do a circle either to the left or to the right, a smaller circle. And when I say smaller circle, it's about 15 meters, 12 meters in the early stages. Come back through the 3 trot poles, and as you kind of land, turn right, turn left, pick up said canter lead. Now, the 3 poles at the top and the bottom with the canter, you don't have to have them there in the early days if you feel like this is going to make your horse upset. So you would just canter 2/3 of a circle, and then as you reapproach the trot poles, you ask them for trot through, and again use your smaller circle you're reorganizing them, you're rebalancing them. So again, if they pull or they lean or they run away, this exercise is really, really good. And again, if they get disunited, as in they get tight through their lower back, it also means you're not cantering forever. So again, we're improving the confidence. So small little good bits. This exercise is amazing. And then, like I said, as they get stronger or more able, I would bring in the 3 canter poles, especially again if your horse struggles to keep the jump of the inside hind and they change to the outside. By them going over the poles, it gets that hind leg jumping without force and without extra pressure of leg. It's also great if you've got a horse necessarily to move forward. I would carry a little stick and tap your stick on your boot to encourage the horse to step forward without more pressure from the leg. Because if you put more pressure on with the leg, they're only going to curl and come back more at you. So they've got to find it fun. We've all got to find this fun. So if you've got a horse that goes, I can't possibly do this, it might be, if you feel safe and happy, get them cantering out across the fields, go hacking, get them moving, get them working. Do it out there. The horses have got to want to go for us and we've got to enjoy. It's got to be fun. So sometimes for some horses, going over poles just gets them thinking more forward, and happier. And it gives us as riders more direction to go rather than just going into a big sand pit, kind of thinking, where are we going? So yeah, I would definitely use this exercise for them. The forward the forward somersault horse is the horse. So again, if we remember these images here, it would be the horse on the top left, or it would be this sort of horse here, which they kind of canter and things get okay. But because the horse struggles in their balance, they then start to get faster and faster and faster. So you get that head and neck up and inverting, and you start to get the running horse. So the horse that feels a little bit restricted with the rein. So as a result, like some people are told to sit up back or lean back. And as again, you can see with this horse, the more you sit up into her and lean back, the more she runs because her back goes down and her neck goes up and she feels stuck. She feels like she can't move. And her way of expressing herself is then to gallop off, quite frankly. And as a rider at this point, no matter what the person on the floor tells you to do, your brain is not as open to it and suggestion because you are in fight or flight mode. So again, the best way with these horses is to always reorganize, rebalance. I know I sound a bit like a broken record, but again, it's this square setup here. But again, this square setup in my arena, this arena is 48 meters long. Bit pedantic, I know. I don't know who built it. But this square takes up 2/3 of the arena. So again, it's not a small square, it's a big square, which allows you to have the space to turn. So we're not over facing these horses, but it's not the full arena, so that we're going too straight for too long. And again, we want to try and ride the transitions through the middle. So again, you might put a pole there or something, but again, you're not going straight forever. You've got a structure as a rider of where to go. You've got a focus point. And again, if your horse falls into the inside quite a lot, I would use my neck strap to take the shoulders to the outside. So again, we're not blocking them with the rein and with the leg. The French Bulldog horse. Um, the French Bulldog horse is the horses that kind of go sideways and stick their quarters in and out and go everywhere. So they run like a French Bulldog. Again, it's normally more profound on their weaker side. So again, if we're looking at the UK horses, it's on the right rein, they run like a French Bulldog. They feel like they're leaning in on our inside leg. All we want to do as a rider is try and kick them off that leg, but all that makes them do is either go faster, bounce up and down more, run away from us, stick their neck in the air. And that is their way of saying, I can't do this. I can't balance. I'm struggling. And again, it's because the hind leg is not built to come underneath and support, especially on their weaker side. And when you feel the hind legs to the inside, the shoulders are pointing to the outside. So when you get to a corner, they then almost like over accelerate through the corner. Feels like you're riding a motorbike, and all you want to do is kind of grip up on the inside part of their body, which is actually sometimes the most not beneficial thing to do. So the canter leg yield, this is perfect for all levels of rider and all levels of horse, but this is really good because again, it thinks about turning the shoulders and opening and expanding the shoulders. So what I would do in the early stages, again, is use my neck strap. And on the weaker rein, like this exercise shows, it's with my neck strap, think of opening it. So if we're on the right rein, using your neck strap to take your shoulders over to the right. So we're always kind of trying to leg your back to the track. But sometimes if we expand the shoulders over to the most space we've got, which is towards the middle of the arena, again, we're thinking about turning the shoulders around the back leg. So instead of fighting that right hind, we're turning their left shoulder over their right hind and thinking of expanding the shoulders and getting them out in front of them. This might cause some horses to accelerate or lose their balance. So again, we reorganize and rebalance at the top, and we do a circle at the top. This is also really good for horses going up through the levels. It starts teaching towards your baby idea of canter half passes. But again, it gets them more uphill because you're taking the shoulders on a different line. So it's not just for your young horses, it's for your advanced horses as well. Like again, if you just look at the top left image, it's about expanding and moving the shoulders. The bottom image is think about their hooves, and again, think about placing their left foreleg over and across their body. And you can also do this with poles. So the blue lines on this exercise are poles. So moving, like you're not going over the poles, but using the poles as a staggered, almost like staggered thing across the arena for you to focus to go towards. So again, think about opening the shoulders and moving them across as opposed to pushing them over and getting the hind legs underneath. Again, on the right rein, it sometimes feels like the quarters are pushing in. On the left rein, it can feel like a struggle to turn. So the quarters are out and you've almost got too much neck bend. So again, we've always got to turn the shoulders around the back legs or kind of scoop the hind legs up. And I've lost an exercise. I've lost an exercise. Sorry, I put it in the wrong order. So the exercise for this would be how to start turning. So that's a square. So those poles that square pole setup that we had, turning the shoulders around the back legs. This exercise is so brilliant for all levels of horse. It goes from the baby stages. You won't be flush to the poles, you'll be slightly wide of them. But again, turn from your outside aids to turn the shoulders around the back legs. You're looking for 3 or 4 steps through each turn. And you can do this baby stage. You can come out through the turns and then leg yield away. You can then turn it into large working canter pirouettes. You can do half passes in or out. This setup is perfect for all levels of horse. Like it's absolutely amazing. So with that, we also have to be mindful of the image on the left is of Greg. Well, the whole thing is of Greg, apart from the top left image, which is obviously not Greg because that's a bright bay. But the dynamics, we just have to be mindful of the time that it takes with these horses and what we're asking in the stages they go through. So like I said, this is Greg. This is the horse stood up in that conformational photo at the very beginning. This horse is so croup high. And as you can see on the right image, he is able to, I've had him for 8 years now, in the canter, have his bottom lower than that of his wither, and his hind leg coming under to support with his shoulders up and out in front of him and his neck coming up and out of like in a more balanced way. And again, his neck naturally sinks below his wither. But this has taken many years and it's still a work in progress. It took me 2 years to be able to canter this horse on 20-meter circle. He's also the one that did buckarooing as a baby. He's my most documented horse because I started doing more social media when he came into my life. So I always talk about Greg because I've got him documented throughout the years. But he was very strong as a baby and a bit of a playful clown. He just thinks everything was hilarious. So not only was it the rideability, but it was the stickability and being able to turn and stop and stay on. But again, it's that transition of physics, and now I'm sounding really science geeky. But again, we go from a downhill feeling to a neutral way of going, which again, I will still be slightly tilted forward from my hips. That's just where they naturally put us into a more uphill way of going. And again, this is where we're taking them past that conformational point. So we have to be really mindful of the questions that we're asking of them at the time. We do have to consider this neck with a shoulder connection. So where your neck, having a neck strap is one of the best pieces of advice I can ever give anyone. Not just because you're holding onto it to stay on, it's to be used as a training tool. So teaching these horses how to move, but also from a rider's point of view, of thinking of like them staying forward and out in front. So does their neck draw forward out of their shoulders, teaching them how to place their front legs, teaching them what each leg means. So that when this leg goes on, I need you to place your feet in this direction. It's also great for horses that get a bit too low or kind of peck forwards because you can lift the neck strap up into the sky to lift them through the base of the chest without interfering with the bit. Because the temptation is to lift them up with the hand and they're not great to the contact as it is anyway. We do have to make sure that they look and they flex as opposed to bend the middle of their neck, because as soon as they've overbent the middle of their neck, that's when we start to lose the rest of the body. So if you imagine you've got a red dot between their ears and a red dot on the pommel of your saddle and it's connected by a white string, we've always got to try and keep that white string straight so they look in the direction as opposed to overflex and overbend their ears. because that can cause a disconnect, and that's when the rest of the body wobbles. They like to have a straight neck. They like to be allowed the neck. It's not saying they need to poke beyond or above, but we've always just got to think of that white string staying straight so we're not over flexing and over bending them. Um, and then from there, like if we imagine it's a bit of a seesaw effect, so where we've got that green line, and you've got their shoulders, you always want to slightly drop the neck to lift the back. But if we go too far the other way and we drop the neck too low, then the bottom's going to come up. So always just imagine that kind of seesaw effect when you're working with these horses. Um, and I always prefer mine in the canter to be a bit more above the bit rather than long and low. Just again, because until they're able to hold themselves to their posture, we need to be mindful that we're not warming them up with their bottoms in the air and then asking them, it's, it's a big ask for them to come and sit up and sit back. It's a big shift in balance. So yeah, I would rather than be there and then work forward to stuff rather than getting over low and long. Stretching at the end of sessions, perfect. Stretching in walk and trot on long reins as a way of stretching them and engaging them, fab. I just think sometimes working long and low can be of a slight detriment in the early stages, and putting them past that conformational point is almost just as detrimental of asking them to sit too early as if we send them too long and low. And then, this is Quaddy. He is also croup high. He's not as croup high as Quad, as Greg. But again, this horse is become uphill, pushing in his flying changes. The bottom right image, you can see here, his shoulders are up and level and in front of him. His wither comes up to me. His changes are massive. And again, you can see him rocking back onto his hocks and pushing forward in the changes. But yeah, again, it takes time. He naturally goes a bit wide behind to balance himself, which you can see a little bit in both of those flying changes images. But again, it's a balance, it's a time, again, he still draws forward in the neck. The neck is never pulled back and in. He's still allowed to feel like he can travel forwards at all times. He is one seriously cool horse. So just to finish, again, please do go and either thank Agria, tag them on social media, or scan this QR code, and go and have a look at all the fabulous work they do. What I'm going to do now is just answer a few questions that we've had come in. Someone has asked, sorry, I just need to kind of go through all of them. Someone said, will they eventually get the strike off? Yes, you will. It does just take time. I will say that if you've got a horse that, like, let's say you're on the difficult rein, so again, let's say it's the right rein, and your horse keeps striking off left, I would, if they strike off for the third time on the left, go and find a way around so you end up on the left rein, make a fuss of them, give them a praise, have a trot, and then try again. What you don't want to do is keep going, because then mentally they don't feel like they're achieving. So therefore they don't keep wanting to do it for you. So yeah, I would definitely do that. Someone said she's got 17-2 thoroughbred, struggles with the downward transitions from canter. They get a few strides hollow, but then he comes right. Those few strides will get less and less and less, and that exercise of doing your big circle into a smaller circle will really help. What we have to remember with these horses is that in the early stages, it might be that they run with their head and neck for 5 strides. And then after a bit of time, they only do it for 4 strides. And that's a massive achievement in itself. So what we've got to do is not get too hell-bent on it's not perfect right away, because we've got to remember their balance, what they're doing, how they're going. So try and have that perspective. And also, I would try and take film. We've all got phones nowadays, but take some footage of yourself, just so you can have that perspective a little bit. Don't do it to be detrimental to yourself of like, oh my God, I look awful, this is bad. Use it as a reflection of celebration. And that's the best way. I would always do it with videos. Sorry. So someone has said they've got an honest and willing gelding who's doing brilliantly in his retraining, but the right rein is a disaster, and he throws his toys out the pram, under saddle, and being lunged tactless. We're now stuck in a rut, and retraining has stalled. How do I suggest we get over this, and at what point do I consider veterinary work to investigate possible pain? I think if you're asking yourself the question of possible pain, I think you're already 2/3 of the way there. I think it's better to get professionals involved sooner rather than later, especially if you feel like your horse is mentally beginning to shut down and you're beginning to feel frustrated, because it's really easy for us as riders to reflect that it's something that we are doing or not doing. So I would either get your vet out to see if we have a potential lameness issue. I would get your physio involved to be like, are they work sore or are they sore? So do we need to get the vet involved and have a holistic approach to try and get like your physio, your saddler, and your vet, if possible. I know it's not easy, all there at the same time to see if we can all talk through a possible solution. And sometimes actually giving them a little break before it goes wrong or when it's going wrong, just everyone's allowed like allows everyone to decompress a little bit and then go again. But if you're still struggling, please do reach out. I can do like video feedback or something, like we're here to help. So please do just say. Someone said their daughter's ex-racehorse swaps canter leads on the straight. Yeah, his canter's quite controlled. He's not rushing. Why would this be? So that's a disunited horse. That's when they struggle in their balance. You might not see it until it happens. But what they'll do is just before they disunite is they'll stick their neck a little bit forward. That is a loss of balance. So what I would suggest with that is like doing a circle at sea, going down 2, 3 strides, doing another 15-meter circle and being slightly off the track so you can always kind of leg yield into it and then doing another circle. So what you start to do is just break the long side up because again, that's when they go back to type and that's when they can kind of not fall apart, but that's when they disunite because they lose their balance a little bit. Um, Someone's asked, my dressage instructor says my mare's canter is her best pace. She's going great. How do I get her used to cantering in a group without tanking off of me on preparation for a showing class? The ROR have their step into showing series along with their club mornings, which is a great way to be able to go and ride with other horses, get an instructor to then be there and help and talk through situations. And they're really relaxed and they're great atmospheres. So I'd look into those. Or if you want to do it at home, I would then possibly get a group of trusted friends and have just start with one other horse in the arena, ride behind them, ride upside them, ride alongside. But again, it's who you trust to be able to kind of, when you say stop, turn, go faster, go slower. And, it's all about, again, the mental state of it. So slowly with these horses, just do it so everyone has a nice time and everyone enjoys themselves. We're meant to enjoy this. We're meant to love riding these horses. And if we love riding them and really enjoy it, they love it too. So that is really, really important. Um, Someone said, any advice on dealing with a Jekyll and Hyde? One day won't stop and the next day is bouncing on the spot and getting stuck. So again, the best thing about having these horses, people might not think about it like this, is that they make us really good riders and really good trainers because we have to think outside the box and we have to also be open to trying a thousand different ways of approaching one thing. So I would, with that horse, possibly get some poles out on the floor, get them encouraging to be able to go, like to step and go. It will also, if they won't stop, it will focus them and focus you rather than just going around and around and around. That figure of 8 would be really, really good with the poles in the middle, would be perfect. She also said in open spaces. So in open spaces, that can be quite tricky because the brain accelerates and they're not being able to think properly. Again, I would ride transitions. I would think about riding in half seat. Again, just think about how they've started off in their first career. We are also running a hacking. Our next one on the 14th of July is to do with hacking and working horse in open spaces with Lloyd Crabb. So I would really sign up to that. Like that would be really, really, really great. And that will probably help a lot more as well. Sorry, I'm just going through these. I'm so glad so many people have asked so many questions. Any ROR in Northern Ireland? So Northern Ireland, that is Troella. Have a look at it. I am also planning on hopefully going back out to Ireland in July and or September. So yeah, go to Troella. They are your point of contact for that. And yeah, keep an eye out on my Facebook and my Instagram, because once I get my button gear, that is one of my next things on my list. Someone has said that when jumping their horse has a preference for the left canter lead on the flat, but actually feels like it's his less good side, because he falls out through the right shoulder and is less bendy. On the right, it feels better, but he loses balance or is feeling more energetic because he's going around like a motorbike. So again, that square exercise will be the making of you. That square exercise will be really good. And using a neck strap to turn and move his shoulders. And on the left, when you feel like he's super bendy, remember that white string on his top line. So you'd almost want to keep him straighter through your outside rein, so your right rein, to keep that white string straight. Having that white string stops us kind of overcorrecting the side we feel we should correct. Most riding is like counterintuitive. It can be really struggling. Long and low stretches with horses with kissing spine to strengthen their core. So horses with kissing spine, there comes a point, there is a study they did in the US of when the head and neck goes too low, it's not actually, the spine doesn't kind of like the spaces between the spinal processes actually get smaller rather than either staying the same or getting greater. So I would encourage dynamic stretching when you're off the horse. I would encourage thinking of it as a working stretch rather than and trying to avoid the pole to drop below the wither, because anything when their pole drops below the wither, when they're weak through the back or you're trying to do rehab stuff, that is, it becomes a bit of a detriment. So I would just try and keep their wither in line, sorry, their pole in line with their wither. So then it's a working stretch. So the horse is engaged in swinging and having the front legs out in front of them for the back legs to naturally come through. Possibly looking to equicore bands as well. So again, something to engage their tummy and get them to step under and through. That'd be really, really good. There was someone about to ask about, their horses coming back from rehab as well, what to do. So some of those transitions, like the ones with the canter for 5 strides, trot for 5 strides, that'll be really good because again, you're not on a tight circle, you're not turning them too much. But again, you're still working on the dynamics of the limb. The figure of 8 with the poles will be really, really good because again, you're getting them to use themselves, getting them to step and bend and go. And again, the shapes are nice and big. But we're still kind of working our way through this a little bit. Emma said she did a huge amount of dressage as a kid. She trained at home to Grand Prix, loved doing 110 Ps. She's got her first thoroughbred. She's 5 from a field injury when I got her, and I've injected both her stifles. I'm rehabbing a horse I don't know, who doesn't know what she's doing, and neither do I with a thoroughbred. Welcome. Understanding her as a type has made such a difference, and I figured out most of what you said, but a clarification is priceless. I'm really glad it's helped. I'm really glad. And like I said, any concerns, give us a shout. I'm here for you. I'm here for everybody. And sorry, I'm just going through all of these. Thank you. So people are just being very kind and saying thank you. Kate said, I struggle with the first step into canter where I get pulled forwards and the canter's quite rhythmical and light. How do I help him? That smaller circle to your bigger circle will really, really help for any horse that lugs forward. And again, it's because he kind of probably oversteps from the hind leg and then throws himself onto his shoulders. The poles, again, the figure of 8 with poles will be really, really, really good. Oh, you guys are so kind, really, really kind. Someone said, do I ever do clinics at Bury Farm in Buckinghamshire? I am near Bury Farm. I don't have any at Bury Farm, but if you want to come to my base, which is 20 minutes from Bury Farm, just give us a shout, and I'm here to help. But thank you guys so much. So what we'll do is we'll send out the recording along with all the supporting material. Like I said, next month we have the 14th of July. It'll be Lloyd Crab, which would be to do with hacking, finding confidence, how to build confidence, find confidence, and how to feel like with your sense of achievements with these horses. So please do sign up. And again, once again, thank you so much for all signing up. And thank you to Agria. And I hope you all have a wonderful day.